Welcome to another Rooster Talk, where we speak with ASX companies and we get them to talk about the updates that they have. Today we've got Riversgold Limited here with Julian Ford, who will be talking to us about their latest announcement with the lithium in Pilbara. We're here at the UWA Club here in Crawley on the University of Western Australia campus. So Julian, welcome back.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it, mate.
Look, your announcement, tell us about it.
Well, last time I was here, I think we were just about to start drilling. And we really were, was a small program, 2,500 metres. And what we were looking to prove up was four things. The first one was that we would have spodumene below surface, which some people doubted, but the ratios and the chemistry for us explained that we should have that. What we'd been finding on surface was a lot of lepidolite. So the second thing we wanted to drill to discover was that as you got below surface, the lepidolite was much narrower on the surface, that these pegmatite swarms would be much bigger at below surface. And then we had also done a whole bunch of ground penetrating radar, which is a geophysics technique that allows us to look in 3D underground. And we want to make sure that what we were seeing was actually pegmatites. And then the last one really was we'd find some other blobs which we didn't know what they were because of their orientation, and we needed to drill those. So really we've only drilled 5 holes of a 21 metre program. We really didn't go to the best place. We went to the easiest place to get to, because this has been a pretty fast track program to get in ahead of the wet season. It's not that wet in the Pilbara, it's just that when it does rain, it can rain very, very hard, and you can get your gear stuck there. So you don't want to be stuck with a whole bunch of standby charges and drillers. So we need to get in and get out before the wet season starts, which might only start in February, who knows. So what we found in our third drill hole was we hit a large 11 metres drill width of pegmatite, and the pegmatite's exactly as we expected to find. The various types of minerals in there, the zonation, and more importantly, when we put a black light over the white minerals, which are difficult to differentiate, quartz, or is it petalite, or is it spodumene, various different types of minerals. Some are lithium containing, some are not lithium containing. But the spodumene is the only one that glows a lovely rose colour, a bit like your watermelon juice over there. And bingo, we found it. So, that's, of those 4 hypotheses we're testing, we've really only done enough drilling to determine 2 of those. But this is it's a major discovery in terms of what we expect to find in your third drill hole.
I mean, it's interesting because from our first conversation, it was the first time where I've looked at lithium exploration in terms of that level of scientific understanding, or discussion, I should say, where, my understanding was pegmatite, you just got spodumene in it, or you just got lepidolite in it. The relationship is that you were discussing was actually very new to me. Can you remind us, like, that relationship scientifically, what you and how you incorporate that into your exploration strategy?
Yeah, so all the major LCT major mines in the world all have lepidolite to some degree or other. And generally what you'll find on surface, what is exposed is the lepidolite, which is 2 reasons for that. One, it's purple. Generally it's purple. Certainly all the lepidolites in Western Australia are purple. That's a small staining from an impurity, manganese, I think. And it's an phyllosilicate, which means it's a mica. It's far more resistant to erosion. So when everything else is being eroded away, it's still there on the surface and you find it. Spodumene is a pyroxene. That just means it's a particular type of crystal that's not as weather resistant. And so in the areas like the Pilbara, where it's much older, they're gone from the surface. So this fractionation zone we talk about which is I think your other questions about, generally we'll find these LCT, lithium, cesium, tantalum, that's the word we use, within a 6K zone of where they've come from, right? And in that, what happens as the minerals in what was a fluid solution, they crystallize out in sequence. And what you find is that at the edges, for instance, we have lepidolite, in the middle we've got spodumene, and then there's a spodumene rich zone, and then right at the end I think we have a tantalum rich zone. I can't recall actually where they all are, but what's important for us is to understand where the spodumene rich zone is, and we haven't found that yet. You know, we'll need to drill a lot more holes and do a lot more chemical analysis to understand where the spodumene rich zone is, but to find spodumene in our third drill hole is very, very encouraging. To me, it demonstrates that there's likely to be a lot of spodumene in the system, and we know we're into a very big system.
Okay. I mean, that, in some ways, do you think that sort of opens up the point that we talked about previously, that exploration for lithium is still very young, very in terms of where we think they are and where they're not, but that doesn't mean that they're not there, because
I think amongst the experts in the sector, I'm talking about the people that are already looking for lithium, there's a much greater understanding of, you know, the LCT pegmatite systems and how they form and where they are. I think outside of that very small fraternity, it's still very new for everybody. I think the other reason is that if you look at some of the traditional black green bushes, you know, it was seen as a single event. You know, the other mines, like Pilgangoora and Wodgina, for instance, they were originally mined for tantalum, not for lithium, because there wasn't much of a demand and it wasn't economic. So only now that we are looking for lithium, which tends not to be in situ, and you can't find it like tin as a alluvial remnant which you can mine. You have to find it in the hard rock, mine that, crush that, and then extract it via flotation to actually produce a product.
Now that you've got the results and you drilled it, you know, you guys go back and sit on the table. I was going to say you look at your sections, but you look at your screens today. Has that altered your thinking, added your thinking, encouraged your thinking in terms of going forward?
It's made our thinking a hell of a lot simpler, because we had a model, we've proven the model, now all we have to go and do is extrapolate that model, and how we do that's very well known and well understood. So going forward now, there's not nearly as much arm waving, it's just executing on a well-known strategy, especially where we are in the Pilbara, because in the Pilbara, you can imagine you've got a three-dimensional thing, and then through 2.5 to 3 billion years, it's been absolutely flattened. So you can actually see, you know, you've cut through that three-dimensional, and you can really understand what you're looking at. So for us, it's really simple now. Fortunately for us, this ground-penetrating radars worked really, really well. We did 15,000 kilometres, about 15 Ks. So we'll mobilise up there probably end of this week. We'll expand around our first project, which is Bengal, which is actually our second priority project. We prefer to be in line, but we weren't able to get into line straight away. We'll try and get in there in the next few weeks. That was just a function of logistics, right? It was very, very important for us to understand that the hypothesis worked ahead of the wet season, because if the hypothesis worked, it really set us up really, really well in terms of planning for a major drill program. We'll do a lot more drilling before the wet season, but really in 2023 will be a major drill program, hopefully to delineate a tier 1 or a tier 2 lithium resource.
Okay. Look, any sort of, like, going forward in terms of what you guys are doing, you know, the future drilling and things like that, does the fact that we are still learning where these things are come into play when you think about what you have at the moment?
Yes and no. I mean, we have a second string to our bow, which is a whole bunch of projects. We're still in the acquisition phase in the Southern Cross Belt, so Forestania all the way up to Marvel Lock and past that. Again, it's a very simple hypothesis. There's relatively narrow greenstone surrounded on both on the west and the east side by granite intrusions. We know those granite intrusions have relatively high lithium, so they're likely to produce lithium-rich pegmatites. Obviously, Mount Holland is the big one that everybody knows about, but we know there's spodumene and lithium all the way up that belt. So that will be our second plan. What's really interesting, being relatively new to this game, we only got into it in March, and in the last 10 days we've been approached by what I'd call some of the majors and people that are very experienced, saying, we've been following your story, we like what you've done it very efficiently and very quickly, and we were waiting to see what you found, and you found exactly what we were expecting. And the reason they like the Tambourah area is because of the basement rocks are the right type, which means that there's a very good probability of a very large lithium deposit or multiple deposits in that region. And so that's very, very encouraging that we've got there so quickly, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay. Any last words for yourself? I guess the picture's pretty tight. The whole idea is we want to get that story out from your announcement. But tell us, going forward, and what investors should be, how they should look at you.
Yeah. Well, I think the first and important thing is we'll have some assays out within the next 4 weeks of our first intersections. So looking at the tenor of that is very important. Just how much lithium, what the grades are, because grade is king. The next question really will be, we need to then expand our geophysics template, because we did a small program just to see if the system worked. The systems work, so we can expand that threefold before the wet season around Bengal. Once we've drilled the other projects, we'll then expand around there. So I guess over the next 3 months will be to understand how big the system is. And we're working on some fancy 3D inversion models, which allows you to see a 3D of all these pegmatites subsurface, so that as we drill them, people understand how big it is and be able to get a graphic picture before we actually start publishing resources or anything like that.
Oh, okay. That sounds great. Look, Julian, thanks for your time. It's good to get you guys in and trying to convince you guys to come in and give us the updates. It's a tough task. And so thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure. It's a very exciting story, and I can't wait to come back to you with the updates as we step through this, what is now a relatively simple, straightforward drill meters in the ground.